Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Wildmen. They may be called different things, but all over the world, several strange mythical creatures share a description. People the world over have been reporting sightings of alleged ape men for hundreds of years, and almost all of them correlate when it comes to just what they saw. These creatures are typically tall and hairy, with a human-like face, large strong limbs, and they walk on two legs. They have been observed in many different habitats, from the forests of the Pacific Northwest, to the deserts of Australia, and the icy peaks of the Himalayas. As such, the stories about these mysterious beasts are some of the most intriguing, haunting, and at times disturbing tales in all of the Earth's folklores. Today we'll be looking at some of the very best tales, from the most famous to the strangest. You might want to stay out of the woods for this one, but if we know you, you'll be at home, ready to hit the lights, sit back, and enjoy. The Patterson-Gimlin Film. What better place to start than here? We've all seen it, and every Bigfoot enthusiast will be very familiar with it. It is by a long way the most famous encounter that has ever taken place, and continues to baffle both experts and skeptics to this day. The surprisingly clear footage was recorded by Roger Patterson and Robert Gimlin in 1967 in the forests of Northern California, and allegedly shows a large bipedal, hairy creature walking towards the tree line, away from Patterson and Gimlin. The creature briefly turns back to look at the cameraman before disappearing into the woods. It is a striking piece of footage indeed, even for the stoic non-believers. It's a piece of footage that has been barraged with accusations of hoaxes from the beginning, but both Patterson and Gimlin have sworn on the clip's authenticity. On the other hand, such a convincing hoax would have been hard to fake given the time the footage was recorded, and you can clearly observe movement in the fur and skin of the creature as it walks towards the forest. So is this a hoax or the real deal? What do you honestly think? The Sierra Sounds. Now this is an incredibly creepy one. In 1971, Ron Moorhead and Al Berry would frequently take trips into the woods to try and catch a glimpse of Bigfoot, or Bigfoot-like creatures. These woods were located in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, again in California. On one trip, Ron brought audio recording equipment with him, with plans of filming throughout the night, in order to hopefully capture the creatures making sound. What he captured that night was almost beyond belief. A series of audio clips are available to listen to online, but the most striking of them all begins with the alleged Bigfoots banging on trees, perhaps with wood or their fists. Ape-like grunts and whooping noises follow, which don't sound anything like any of the other creatures present in the Sierra Nevada mountains. After a while, the audio turns extremely unsettling. Two creatures can be heard speaking in an unrecognizable language to each other, which sounds very jumpy and hectic. Ron can also occasionally be heard interacting with the beasts, who shout back at him in return. Several things are striking about this audio. Firstly, no known language can be discerned from the clip. The creatures are clearly speaking in a guttural, deep tone, very different from any language known to man. Also, audio experts have analysed the clips and have found that human voices would have been unable to produce the tones and pitches of sound found in the recordings, with vocals alone. There is also no evidence that the audio has been tampered with or edited, and Ron stands by the authenticity of the clips. Take a listen, but be warned, if this isn't a hoax, and is some unknown creatures vocalizing in the woods at night, it's incredibly terrifying.
There's two of them across the creek at the big rocks.
A mother and child. Time for a more recent sighting. This video footage was recorded by a man going by the name Eddie V, who submitted his finding to the Rocky Mountain Sasquatch organization in 2021. The actual footage comes from Eddie's cousin, who was kayaking down a stretch of the Cass River in Michigan. In the short clip, a large humanoid figure, seemingly covered in a layer of light brown fur, can be seen carrying what appears to be an infant, which looks very similar to the mother creature. The footage was filmed from a safe distance, and as is the case with many alleged Bigfoot videos, is quite blurry. Still, a figure matching the description of Bigfoot can clearly be seen crossing the river with a baby in its arms. Take a look. What do you think of that one? The Mammoth Cave Incident. This story comes out of Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, where two university students, Brad Ginn and Madeline Durand, were woken up from their camping trip to the area by loud voices and the firing of guns. A man had run into the cave, his son in tow, brandishing a loaded gun, and was firing into the darkness at what he claimed was Bigfoot. As the man ran in, the students heard him shouting, "Oh my God, did you see that? There it is." The couple ran out to the cave to confront the man, who explained to them that he had seen a large, hairy humanoid enter the cave near to where the couple was sleeping. What happened next is unclear, but police attended the incident at the cave at around 2 a.m. and no injuries were reported. But a spokesperson reiterated the fact that no weapons are allowed in the area. The Eagle Webcam. In October of 2016, viewers on the Carbon TV Eagle Cam, a live webcam set up for viewers to observe bald eagles returning to their nests in real time, witnessed something out of the ordinary pass by underneath the nest. 30 meters below, at ground level, in the top right of the screen, a human-like figure passes by below the camera. Dark and featureless, it's likely that this could have been a hoax, but the viewers of the camera seem to think otherwise. What do you think? The Yowie of Jimna. It's not just America that has its fair share of Bigfoot sightings. The Australian term for unknown humanoid creatures with thick fur is Yowie, and one was sighted not too long ago in December 2021 in Jimna, a rural Queensland town. Seamus Fitzgerald and his two friends from work were driving back from their shift when they spotted a humanoid figure slouching over on its hind legs underneath a streetlight. Initially, the friends thought that the creature was a boar or another large animal, but as they got closer, the classic Bigfoot form emerged, and the creature sprinted off human-like on its two hind legs. The three friends were startled and found it very difficult to get to sleep after what they had seen that night. The trio returned to the same area for a series of hikes over the coming weeks to try and catch a glimpse of the strange creature once again, but to no avail. To this day, they have no idea what they saw. The Bigfoot of Cornwall. Travelling to the other side of the world now, to the United Kingdom, a truly unnerving story has appeared in Cornwall, in the southwesternmost tip of England. In the year 2000, in the little village of St. Morgan, an anonymous individual reported their story to the British Bigfoot Research Organisation, who made it public. The individual, who was around 22 years old at the time, was working in a nearby field when he heard a loud, repetitive knocking sound on a nearby tree, a signal that many Bigfoot enthusiasts say is indicative of a creature in the area. When the group he was working alongside left for the day, he stayed behind to see if he could find out what was making the noises. A series of clicking and whistling sounds continued to come from the tree line when a strange humanoid face emerged from the bushes. The eyewitness described the creature as being 6'5" in height, with a copper-coloured coat of fur. It looked right at him before turning and disappearing into the woods. It sounds like a strange encounter indeed, but the eyewitness claims he is 100% certain that he saw Bigfoot that day. What do you think? Mysterious Idaho footage. This next piece of footage was captured in Idaho at the end of 2021, which was uploaded by YouTube user NVTV. The footage is unusually clear, showing a close-up encounter with what appears to be Bigfoot. The uploader of the video has commented on the level of detail captured in the body and fur of the creature in the footage, and the fact that its hulking, monstrous size denotes an animal that simply can't be a man in a suit, in their words. The footage really is striking, as it's unusual to see an alleged Bigfoot so close to the camera. The figure really fills the screen, and you can get a good impression of the beast's size from the width of his body and shoulders. What do you think this footage shows? The Battle of Ape Canyon. Let's go back in time to 1924 now, to an alarming incident that was reported in a narrow canyon on Mount St. Helens' eastern face. The area was initially famous for Bigfoot sightings, and investigators would often take to the woods to try and catch a glimpse of the tall, hairy cryptid, after reports of strange noises in the woods were filed. This curious tale begins when in the summer of 1924, several gold prospectors bolted out of the woods, claiming that 7-foot-tall gorilla men attacked them in the woods. They were out working when they saw 4 gigantic shapes start to move through the trees, claiming they had upright pointed ears, covered from head to toe in layers of thick black fur. Fred Beck, one of the prospectors, who was terrified by what he had seen, fired his rifle at one of the figures, forcing one of the creatures to topple backwards off a cliff, presumably falling to its death. Later that night, the men were awoken in their cabins by the sounds of thudding and banging on their cabins' walls. The sounds of rocks and bodies crashing into the side of the building alarmed the men, who watched helplessly as one of the figures from earlier on in the day tore a hole in the wooden roof. According to the men, one of the rocks wielded by the creatures was hurled at Beck, who was knocked unconscious for more than 2 hours after it hit him. The men apparently managed to fend off the creatures, who fled when the sun came up. Beck awoke, and the men fled to the nearest town, relaying their story. We could go far more in depth with this one, but what do you make of it? The Strange Tale of Albert Ostman. Another prospector's tale, this one comes from the Canadian Albert Ostman, who again in 1924 claimed to have had a bizarre encounter in the woods of British Columbia. Albert was visiting the area on holiday. He was familiar with the North American wilds, and was a renowned lumberjack and woodsman who refused to believe the stories of ape men that had been reported across the region. This skepticism wouldn't continue for long, however. As Albert lay down in his sleeping bag one night, he claims to have been awoken as he was dragged along the ground, still in the bag. He lay there, presumably terrified, as what he describes as a Bigfoot dragging him across the forest for 3 hours. The beast eventually stopped, dropped him, before its family, 2 adults and 2 children. Albert claimed that the tallest of the creatures was 8 feet tall and covered in a thick layer of fur. Strangely, Albert claimed that the creatures held him captive and looked after him for a total of 6 days, until he was eventually able to escape by drugging the beasts with some snuff, a type of smokeless tobacco. According to Albert, the Bigfoots fed him sweet-tasting grass, and despite the fact that he was carrying a gun, Albert did not attempt to shoot the animals, as they had not hurt him, and he believed they were peaceful. Albert kept his tale to himself for 24 years, out of fear of being accused of being crazy, until he eventually spoke to a local newspaper, The Province, relaying his story in full to the world in 1957. What do you make of Albert's story? The Ellisburgh Wildman. This is a very old sighting, perhaps even the first official documented Bigfoot sighting in America, which took place in 1818. This very first Bigfoot report was featured in the New York newspaper, the Exeter Watchman, and was written as follows. Reports say that in the vicinity of Ellisburgh was seen on the 30th of August by a gentleman of unquestionable veracity, an animal resembling the wildman of the woods. It is stated that he came from the woods and then took his flight in a direction which gave a perfect view of him for some time. He is described as bending forward when running, hairy, and the heel of a foot narrow, spreading at the toes. Hundreds of persons have been in pursuit for several days, but nothing further is heard or seen of him. The frequent and positive manner in which this story comes induces us to believe it. It's brief and doesn't give away much information about the encounter, leaving much to the imagination. What was this creature witnessed in the woods all those years ago? Was it the real deal, or perhaps a chance encounter with the local wildlife? Perhaps even a bear? What do you think? The Ruby Creek Bigfoot Encounter. Another old sighting, this time from September of 1941 in British Columbia. George Chapman and his family were outside their home, relaxing in the fields on a quiet afternoon, when the unthinkable happened. George's eldest son bolted from the fields towards the house, panicked, exclaiming that a large cow had appeared at the foot of the nearby mountains, on the outskirts of the surrounding woods. George's wife consoled the boy, then started off in the direction her son had emerged from, to see what the fuss was about. Sure enough, Mrs. Chapman saw something, but it wasn't a cow. She described the beast, which she first assumed was a bear, as being covered in 4 inches of thick fur, which was brown all over. The creature stood over 7 feet tall and was human-like, only exceptionally bulky and with very long arms. The proposed Bigfoot was a mere 30 meters from Mrs. Chapman by the end of the encounter, when her children ran to her, and the creature skulked off into the woods. Supposedly, when George Chapman was investigating the surrounding area later that day, the family's shed had been broken into, barrels of fish had been raided, and long brown hairs were found in the vicinity. Footprints, giant footprints at that, had also been found leading away from the property, and the family often heard the creature letting out a strange gurgling whistle in the dead of night in the following days. The Florida Skunk Ape. While Bigfoot is synonymous with the pine forests of the Pacific Northwest, it's not the only place in America it, or at least a very similar creature, has been sighted. The skunk ape is Florida's answer to Bigfoot, and eyewitness accounts describe a similar but smaller ape man. The most famous sighting comes from 2000, when a family heard banging and scratching sounds on their outdoor decking. Fearing they were being burgled, the family cautiously headed to the window to see what was going on, where they snapped this image. They initially figured that the animal in the photo was an orangutan, escaped from the local zoo. However, believers online were quick to point out that this creature resembles an orangutan in general form only, and looks nothing like the Indonesian orange great apes. While aggressive outbursts from Bigfoot are well documented, the skunk ape is said to be a kind, gentle creature. That being said, it's likely that an observer would smell the ape before they see it. Its namesake is its foul, putrid scent, smelling like a vile concoction of wet dog mixed with the spray of a skunk. What do you make of the skunk ape? Mike Wooley's encounter. In the December of 1981, hunter Mike Wooley was on the lookout for deer in the Louisiana woods, not too far from the town of Keechee. As he waited in his deer stand, he could hear noises emerging from the bushes. A deer bolted out of the greenery, which Mike claims was acting like it was being chased by a predator. A number of creatures are local to the region that could have been chasing the deer, bears, coyotes, and alligators, for example. But what Mike saw was completely unexpected. Crashing through the undergrowth, a huge human-like figure, 8 feet tall and covered in thick black hair, caught sight of Mike and started towards him. Before doing so, it let out a roar, to which a second creature emerged from the bushes, letting out a series of grunts and whistles. Mike instantly fled, pausing to occasionally see if he was being followed. At first, the creatures actively pursued him, but when he fired a warning shot, the pair seemed to back down. This gave Mike the opportunity to unlock his truck and speed out of the forest as quickly as he could. What did he see that day? A recent Bigfoot audio recording. This video was published by NVTV Bigfoot just a few weeks ago in June of 2022. The user claims that they left their camera running unattended in the woods of Georgia to see what they would capture, and this is what they heard. It's a relatively long clip, but the sounds of rustling foliage and the occasional whoop or screech can be heard behind the tree line. What do you think about this clip? Some of the vocalizations sound eerily human-like, but is this too much of a coincidence? The last cabin in Portlock. Visit the town of Portlock, Alaska today, and you won't see much. One solitary, dilapidated cabin stands on the verge of some dense pine forests in a silent, eerie clearing. It's hard to believe that this was once a bustling town founded in the 1780s. This persisted for hundreds of years until the town was suddenly abandoned in 1950 due to some strange occurrences in the surrounding woods. It started in 1905 when staff at the local cannery refused to work on account of something that had been bothering them. Things took a turn for the worse when hunters and gold prospectors began to disappear in the 1930s, taking their daily trips out to the woods and failing to return home at the end of the day. A body was even found in 1931 which had been killed by a single blow without the use of a weapon, something that would have been difficult for a human to manage. 18-inch long footprint tails were also discovered in the area, and people would occasionally catch a glimpse of a huge, hairy figure attacking and destroying local property. Further bodies continued to appear, bearing strange bite marks and impact wounds unassociated with those made by bears or wolves. Finally, by 1950, the townspeople could take no more and packed up and left the town. Several photos exist of the final cabin, which still stands to this day, surrounded by the woods, where so many are supposed to have met their ends at the hands of mysterious creatures. If you would like to learn more about the last cabin in Portlock, we go far more in depth on this incredible story over on our Hit the Lights podcast. Check out our podcast in the link in the description or comment section below. Painted rock. Although the term Bigfoot wasn't coined until much later, sightings of large hairy ape men have persisted across North America long before the arrival of European settlers. California is famously a Bigfoot hotspot, and the native Yokot people have their own stories to tell about the mysterious cryptid. Petroglyphs at a site known as Painted Rock on the Tule River Reservation seem to depict several towering, hairy humanoid figures. The native people refer to the largest of the figures as Hairy Man, and are estimated to have been carved over 500 years ago. When European settlers did begin to colonize North America in the 16th century, Spanish explorers would tell tales of dark watchers, tall, hairy figures that would loom from the trees in the night, silently watching their campsites. The Bigfoot legend is one that has persisted for many, many years. Bigfoot on a security camera. This video was uploaded to YouTube by the account Mr. Man on the 12th of February 2022. The uploader has stated in the description that this footage was shot on a security camera, but you can clearly make out the eerie subject standing with its back to the camera in the center of the screen. A large muscular figure matching the classic description of Bigfoot stands swaying in the nighttime air before it begins to saunter around the property. It appears incredibly muscular and powerful, much bulkier and bigger than a human. It's certainly unusual footage, but what do you make of it? Something's at the window. This is an incredibly creepy one. A series of images were published by Scott Yeoman in his Bailey, Colorado home, which appeared to depict a large, hairy, human-like face appearing at his window. Scott heard a series of strange noises from outside his building, and when he went to investigate, this is what he saw. At first he assumed the figure was a bear, but when he caught a glimpse of its face, he knew that couldn't be the case. Scott ran for his gun in case the creature tried to break in, but when he had returned to the window, it was nowhere to be seen. What do you think these pictures show? And what would you have done if you were in Scott's position? Eric Shipton's discoveries. Famed explorer Eric Shipton, known for conquering many of the world's most difficult mountain peaks, had his own story to tell about Bigfoot, or rather, its proposed close cousin, the Yeti. In 1951, Eric climbed Mount Everest, and while passing through the peak's Munlung Basin, 19,000 feet above sea level, he claimed to have come across a trail of 13-inch long footprints in the snow. Footprints unmistakably similar to that of a great ape. He even snapped several photos, using his pickaxe to demonstrate the gargantuan scale of the prints. Apparently the trail led for roughly a mile when they disappeared into the thick snow and rocks. Shipton was not lucky enough to actually witness the creature with his own eyes on his trip, but these strange traces of a humanoid beast in the snow have captivated the cryptozoology community for years. Just picture it, a Yeti living in the uninhabited mountain that is Everest. So, that's 20 intriguing examples of Bigfoot encounter stories. What is your take on the tales of the mysterious ape man of the Pacific Northwest? Do they exist, or are they a hoax? Perhaps you have your own encounter to tell. Whatever the truth is, the tales of Bigfoot still, to this day, provide such an intriguing mystery that so many dedicated individuals have committed their lives to solving. And perhaps one day, the truth will be revealed for certain. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.